Good evening. Welcome to the Snine Elementary Catchment Change Consultation webinar. We will begin immediately. I just want to share with you that on the screen that'll be upcoming, you will see that we've had a number of consultations. It's been a wonderful process since September, and we're at the December 10th webinar, and we will be continuing after this time. So we'll be continuing on as you'll learn in the webinar itself. I do want to respectfully honor and acknowledge that we are meeting in the unceded territory and lands of the Secwepemc people, and we really do love to live, learn, and be here every day. I will just turn it over to my colleagues to introduce themselves from left to right. So I will start with
Art McDonald, Director of Facilities.
Sherry Christensen, Director of Transportation.
Lisa Carson, Assistant Superintendent.
Chelsea Eisner, Director of Communications and Board Administration.
And I'm Rhonda Nixon, Superintendent of Schools. So tonight, the purpose of the presentation is to look at a proposed catchment change due to the opening of Snine Elementary School and to gather your feedback and questions. Our goal is to respond with any necessary changes to the catchment change plan, and our outcome is to share your feedback and questions as well as proposed responses with the Board of Education to enable the board to make a decision about a catchment change by May or June of 2025. The Board of Education is comprised of 9 elected school trustees. In Board Policy 2, the Board of Education is responsible for catchment changes and grade reconfigurations and for community engagement, as outlined in Administrative Procedure 135, Reconfiguration of Schools. During public engagement, it is our responsibility to provide parents and school community members with the issue under consideration, objectives, and criteria for considering the reconfiguration, options being considered and supporting information, and a process for school community engagement. The issue under consideration is that we expect to open Snine Elementary School in September of 2026, which means that we require students to be relocated through a catchment change process. We have 2 objectives: to create a catchment area for Snine Elementary, and with the additional space created by the new school, to reduce space pressures at neighboring schools where possible. The criteria for determining if we were successful is that we considered your feedback and responded to it. We communicated with those who will be impacted. We reassured families impacted by the catchment changes well in advance. We worked with school administrators to communicate consistent messages with families, and we maintained the current practice of each elementary school feeding into one secondary school. The public spectrum of community engagement, we follow from left to right. We will be providing you with information, so we are at the informed level for sure. We have and will solicit your feedback tonight and use it to analyze alternatives and potential changes to the decision. So that's the consultation part. And we believe that we reach the involvement stage because we work directly with the public and we work directly with you to think about your concerns, your questions, your aspirations, and to truly consider that by the time we reach a catchment change, we feel like we've reached the best solution given what we can know from the community. We don't promise collaboration and empowerment because that would be promising that the community can make the decision when in fact we know that actually it's the Board of Education who is charged with that responsibility at the end of the day. The decision, when will it be made? It'll be made by May to June 2025. And how will parents learn about it? We will send communication to each family impacted, all staff and parents in the district, and provide updates on our website.
So before I get into the details, I'm just going to do a quick overview summary of what the proposed catchment area changes are. The first one is the Pineview Valley area moves from McGowan Park Elementary to Snine Elementary. A portion of Aberdeen Elementary moves to Snine Elementary, and there's a corresponding change from South Kamloops Secondary to Sahali Secondary. A portion of Summit Elementary moves to McGowan Park Elementary. A portion of Dufferin Elementary moves to Snine Elementary, and from South Kamloops Secondary to Sahali Secondary. And a portion of Savin Elementary moves to Snine Elementary, and from South Kamloops Secondary to Sahali Secondary. So just an overview map of the southwest sector of Kamloops. We've labeled the locations of all the schools with the blue text and the white background. Dufferin Elementary in the top left corner, Snine Elementary under construction in kind of the bottom left, Pacific Way Elementary at the bottom of the page, Aberdeen Elementary over bottom right, McGowan Park on the right side of the screen, and Summit Elementary in the upper right portion of the screen as indicated by the red cursor. So 3 areas within Kamloops we're looking at. The first is the Pineview Valley area. The second is the lower Aberdeen area. And the third is the upper Sahalee area. So a zoomed in map of the Pineview Valley area. So Hugh Allen Drive here, Copperhead Drive here. Snine Elementary is being built right now down at the south end of Pineview Valley. And what we're looking at doing is the yellow outlined area currently attends McGowan Park Elementary for elementary school. We're looking at moving that from McGowan Park to Snine Elementary. The second map shows the lower Aberdeen area that we've talked about, and I've got a zoomed in map coming up next, but on the left side, we've got Pacific Way. At the top of the page, we've got Highway 1, Highway 5 on the right side of the page. And then we basically follow Hugh Allen and Howe across here. So the yellow outlined area would move from Aberdeen Elementary to Snine Elementary. And this is the zoomed in map just to show the areas. So Hugh Allen Drive off of Pacific Way comes across here all the way over to Highway 5A. Howe Road comes off of Hugh Allen and over to Pacific Way. So everything south of this yellow line, we are looking at moving from Aberdeen Elementary to Snine Elementary. The third area within Kamloops is what we're labeling the upper Sahalee area. So currently the yellow outlined area goes to Summit Elementary, and we are looking to move them to McGowan Park Elementary. The reason for this is we've got about 200 students that will leave McGowan Park Elementary and go to Snine Elementary over the Pineview Valley area, which frees up a bit of room in McGowan Park to take some pressure off of Summit Elementary. And the zoomed in map for this, so we've got Highway 5A on the left side of the page, Summit Drive runs along the bottom. McGowan Park would be down here just off this picture. And so we're looking at moving this yellow outlined area from Summit to McGowan Park. We've got a few rural areas we're looking at, Lac Lejeune and Lac Lejeune Road corridor. We're looking at moving them from Dufferin Elementary to Snine Elementary and from South Kamloops Secondary to Sahalee Secondary. Then further out to the west of Kamloops on this map, Kamloops is right in here. We've got this yellow outlined area, which we're calling the Cherry Creek area. We're looking at moving them from Dufferin to Snine and from South Kamloops to Sahalee. And the blue outlined area on the left side of the page is what we're calling the Tobiano area. So we're looking at moving those students from Savinaw to Snine Elementary and from South Kamloops to Sahalee Secondary. And currently, Tobiano and the area around it, their catchment school for elementary is actually Savin Elementary, but we have 0 students from Tobiano attending Savin Elementary. And that's mainly because of our bus runs typically run west to east. And we've got the high school runs come in from as far west as Skeetchison, pick up students and bring them into town. And we've always had room on those buses to bring these rural students into Kamloops. And we do not have any buses going from east to west out to Savinaw. With the enrollment projections that we're going to get into, a few of the underlying assumptions that are embedded in them, we assume that the 2026 grade 7s and their siblings will stay at their current school with all other students attending their new catchment school. And we need to point out these are assumptions in the projections and will form part of the recommendations to the board, but these have not been approved by the board yet. We also assume the 2026 grade 12s and their siblings would stay at the current school with all other students attending their new catchment school. And the reason we do this for the grade 7s and the grade 12s is past catchment change has shown us that the number one issue we get is that parents want their students to spend their last year where they currently are. And we're also assuming that students attending schools of choice will stay at their current school. For example, if we've got a grade 4 student living in Pineview Valley that attends Kamloops School of the Arts, we assume they're still going to attend Kamloops School of the Arts after the catchment change because they've made that choice to attend that school. These are 10-year enrollment projections, and they're based on the current catchment areas. So you can see we've labeled these as no change. So these are basically from last year's long-range facility report. And we're just targeting the 2026 column because that's when this should come into effect. I won't spend too much time on the individual numbers because I've got a summary slide that I think does a better job of explaining it. And a similar analysis in 2026 that shows what would happen if we make these changes. So for instance, Aberdeen Elementary was just below 540, it would drop to 500. What we're showing here is the 2026-2027 capacity utilization summary. And capacity utilization is just the enrollment of the school divided by the capacity. So if we have a school that has 300 student enrollment and a 300 student capacity, it's at 100%. You can see the impact of the proposed catchment changes. So Aberdeen Elementary would go from 141% to 131%. Dufferin Elementary would go from 159% to 113%. McGowan Park Elementary would go from 155 to 111%. Snine, because it's not open yet, is 0, would go to 66% on opening. Summit Elementary would drop from 127% to 106%. Sally Secondary would increase from 131% to 137%. And South Kamloops Secondary would reduce a little bit from 118% to 114%. Longer term, these would be the 10-year projections. I always tell people with 10-year projections, we don't put as much stock into them because they're quite far away. But you can see the impact if we do nothing. Aberdeen Elementary should be at 134%, 123 at the new configuration. Dufferin goes from 153 to 93. McGowan Park is at 243%, and the reason for that is Snine is not built yet, so that's what it would be without Snine. With the revised configuration, it'd be at 87%, and sort of so on and so forth down the list. So the positives to the proposed new catchment areas, it slightly reduces the overcapacity issue at Aberdeen Elementary. And was mentioned earlier, one of our objectives of this is to try to reduce pressures at neighboring schools where possible. These changes would significantly reduce the overcapacity issue at Dufferin Elementary and McGowan Park Elementary and reduce the overcapacity issue at Summit Elementary. It does increase the current significant overcapacity issue at Sally Secondary. And the last bullet about Snine Elementary is mainly just there because the Snine Elementary site is quite a small site. It's difficult to add portables just because of the shape of the site and the topography. And if we had to add portables, we would be probably putting them on the playfield. Tied to this always comes up, what are we doing with transportation, any modifications that are required? So with the proposed changes, the elementary bus routes out of Pineview Valley would be discontinued for September 2026 with the caveat that we would still be providing bus for grade 7s and their siblings if there were any. Over to McGowan Park Elementary. Busing will still be provided in accordance with Board Policy 17 and Administrative Procedure 560. And we say that just so people understand that just because we're undergoing catchment changes, we still have to follow our policies and procedures. Based on the proposed catchment changes, we would have some route changes, and they include the routes from Cherry Creek, Tobiano, and Lac Lejeune will include a drop-off at Snine Elementary, and this would add about 5 minutes to each route in the morning and the afternoon. And we would also modify an existing route to transport elementary students living between Pacific Way and Highway 5A. Those are the students identified in the lower Aberdeen area affected by the catchment change to Snine Elementary. And the reason we would be providing this bus is the students at the east end of that proposed catchment change area are actually outside of the walk limits to Snine Elementary. And as mentioned earlier, we're trying to take pressure off surrounding schools, and in particular Aberdeen Elementary, which is very full at around 500 students currently. So one of the options we did look at was what would happen if we relocated the Montessori program from Aberdeen Elementary to Snine Elementary. That would take about 120 students out of Aberdeen and move them to Snine. And then again, at about 20 students per grade, there's a corresponding change in the high schools from South Kamloops to Sahali Secondary. So a similar analysis to the one we did earlier. So again, you remember this dropped from about, for Aberdeen, from about 540 down to 500, and with the Montessori change down to 381. Similar analysis on the 2026-2027 capacity utilization. So if we do nothing, Aberdeen would be at 141%, with the first proposed configuration to be at 131%, and with this alternate configuration, including relocating the Montessori program, it would be at 99%. The other changes would be to Snine Elementary, which instead of opening at 66% would open at 92%. Sally Secondary would increase from 137% to 140%. South Gallup Secondary would drop from 114 to 112%. Then long term for the 2033-2034 projections, the big impacts are at Snine, where we're looking at going from 141% to 167%. Sally Secondary goes from 175% to 189%. And as I mentioned earlier, these are projections that are quite far in the future. Positives to the alternate catchment change option: it significantly reduces the overcapacity issues at Aberdeen Elementary, Dufferin Elementary, and McGowan Park Elementary, and it reduces the overcapacity issue at Summit Elementary. The negatives are it increases the significant overcapacity issue at Sahali Secondary. It relocates a program that is well grounded at Aberdeen Elementary. And in fact, when we had our consultation meeting with the Aberdeen parents, a lot of them indicated that even if the program moved, they would leave their students at Aberdeen Elementary. So we likely would not see the catchment change impacts that the projections indicate. And again, the comment about Snine Elementary and the difficulty to add portables in the future. So as we've been doing consultation with staff and the PAC groups, we've kind of defined some major themes that we've seen. Sahali Secondary remains over capacity, and discussion was about how to manage overcapacity issues over the next 5 to 8 years, while we hopefully will have a new high school by that time. Snine Elementary is on a small, topographically challenging site, so we have to be mindful of future growth. And with just the proposed catchment change, Aberdeen Elementary does not see a significant reduction in enrollment, even though it does see a reduction. And as I mentioned, the Montessori alternative catchment change will likely not result in the projected enrollment reductions, as many parents would keep their students at Aberdeen Elementary. As we've been doing consultation, we've had some suggestions from various groups. Several similar suggestions have been made on how to reduce the overcapacity issue at Aberdeen Elementary, mainly having the Knutsford area elementary students move from Aberdeen to McGowan Park. And although this would reduce the enrollment at Aberdeen Elementary, it will increase the significant overcapacity issue at Sahali Secondary. We've been asked to review impacts on bus ride times, particularly for the rural students. Some schools, we've received feedback that they would rather stay at their current capacity utilization to preserve their community. And Summit parents requested consideration of reducing the size of the proposed catchment change area to go to McGowan Park to balance capacity at both schools and reduce some commuting challenges. So before we get to the Q&A, we just like to go through these so we don't forget at the end of the presentation, just to give you an idea of what communication tools we will be using and how you can further provide feedback at a later date, particularly if you don't remember to ask a question tonight. So on our website, which you'll see in a minute, there is a dedicated spot for the Snine Elementary catchment change. The community-specific invitations are what we're doing through these consultation meetings. And then there will be reports going back through school principals and PACs. The superintendent's update, which comes out weekly, has updates, and our social media posts will also have updates, and you're able to provide feedback. So as I mentioned on our website, if you go to www.sd73.bc.ca, you're going to look for this banner. It's one of the scrolling banners that you'll see on the front page of the website. And once you click on that, it will take you to something that looks like this. And down at the very bottom, which you won't be able to read on your screen, where we have the click here arrow, that is a place where you can submit further questions and or feedback.
At this time, if you have any questions, we invite you to enter them into the Q&A on your Zoom. That should be along the bottom menu panel. Just look for Q&A and please add your questions there and we will do our best to answer as many as we can. As a reminder, if you think of a question after tonight's webinar, we do invite you to visit the website sd73.bc.ca. And on the Snine elementary page, you can find a link to submit your feedback and questions there. We haven't received any questions in the Q&A yet, so we'll give it a few more moments for you to enter your questions.
It's been a wonderful time with you this evening, and we hope that you would be willing, if you're so inclined, to look at the website, encourage those who missed tonight to see the recording of the webinar, and then to submit questions because many of your friends may not have been able to attend this evening. We're so very grateful you did. Have a very nice night. Goodbye.